in preparation for this discussion, I did run across the important distinction between being stressed and being burned out. And I'd like you to comment a little bit more on that. And also, if you want to reiterate the fact that stress and burnout can lead to depression, but that's certainly a different issue altogether. So just a little more about the difference between stress and burnout.
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up. And truthfully, the research is mixed on this. The definition that I cited and the research that was done by Christina Maslach and others from Stanford, such as Tate Shanafelt, the work of the Mayo Clinic, et cetera, do not conflate it or mix it. But there are constructs in which burnout is a subcategory of stress. And there's other research that would even say that the overlap is so great that there isn't really a substantive difference to warrant a separate definition. So with all of that, though, I think that the work that was done up at Stanford does a really good job of parsing out some of the differences. Getting kind of maybe to the end, I would say if you're not sure whether you're stressed or burnout, don't stress yourself out about defining it. Get some help.
Right. Bottom line,
so
get some help,
having said that, don't twist yourself into a pretzel trying to figure it out. So let's start with stress. So while the feelings of sadness can be associated with both burnout and stress is also tends to be associated with fear and anxiety, in anticipation or in response to anticipating workplace stressors or in reaction to surprises. So stress is more of a high energy experience. It can also be quite performative. So with that, there are two kinds of stress that are really important to think about. So there's, just like I talked about eudaimonic with the first two words, EU means good. There's also eustress. So EU and the word stress. So that's a good stress. And it's associated with high degrees of focus and engagement and readiness associated with that subjective well-being. Like that feeling that athletes get when they're in the playoffs and they're running on the field, or musicians get when they're walking on the stage, or surgeons get when they're walking into the OR. Right? So people will often even talk about the feeling of being amped. So it's a high energy, eustress is a high energy in the zone. That's usually associated with positive emotions such as confidence and pride. Okay, so that's eustress. Of course, what we're really focused on is the other kind of stress, which is distress. Okay, so distress, of course, is the bad stress associated with elevated cortisol levels, which I don't have to tell you or your audience. But that's like termites on a house on the body, on the wear and tear in the body. And that's in response to real or perceived environmental stressors. And you know that in the immediate reaction to sudden change is really what distress is for, right? Those elevated cortisol levels are supposed to get us into that fight or flight, activate the amygdala, right? And shut down the judgments and just kind of go. So if we're jamming on the brakes in the car, or we're grabbing the baby and running out of the house when the fire alarm goes, that's what distress is supposed to be for, that urgency. But the kind of stress you're talking about is the distress that we carry with us over a long period of time. So that, again, elevated levels of fear, anxiety, anger, disgust can all be associated with that kind of stress. But as you can imagine, because distress is high energy and highly performative, we're overtaxing, we're overusing our internal resources. So at some point there's an imbalance between our internal capacity and the demands of the external environment. And so that's where kind of that distress can lead into burnout, which now that leads us into our definition of our distinction with burnout. So burnout is more of a low energy experience. So where the term burnout came from, interestingly, is using the analogy of a match. I don't even know if everybody knows what a match is anymore, but if you don't know, Google it. So Just think of when you strike a match, it burns,
Right.
but eventually the fuel that's at the tip of it runs out. And so we say that the match is burned out. So it's out of fuel. So the experience of burnout is our tank is empty, we're out of fuel.
Got it.
So referencing our discussion of eudaimonic, the good well-being, burnout seems to be associated not with the absence of hedonic, absence of good feelings, but it's associated with loss, right? It's a loss of that eudaimonic. It's a loss of meaning, purpose, growth, identity, agency, influence, control, significance, importance, accomplishment, and even, dare I say, heroism
Hmm.
in some professions, right? Physicians are part of that, not alone. Firefighters, police officers, some teachers, right? All have that, we have a higher purpose, a higher calling that's associated with that. And so when we're asking ourselves questions, do I matter? Do I belong?
Got it.
Am I good enough? Can I show up? Am I even being seen? Or am I being seen the way I see myself? Or the way I have been seen in the past, but I'm no longer being seen? Those can be associated with feelings of burnout. Uh, According to that Medscape study that I referenced earlier
Right.
in 2022, 42% of pulmonologists reported burnout having a severe impact on their
Hmm.
lives. And 33% said it was moderate. So only 25% said it was none.